Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership.
Welcome to episode 305 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about being authentic in your leadership style, and particularly, can you be authentic and adapt your style or approach at the same time? It's an interesting question, so let's get into this one right now. So this is a question that has come up recently in a few coaching conversations I've been having. And it is that if we are told to adapt our style, and I'm a big fan of, or a big advocate of adapting our style to suit the situation, even if you might be, quieter or extroverted or whatever, you might adapt your approach or your style depending on what's needed at the time. And one of my coaching clients asked me recently, is that authentic to adapt your style when it's not really your normal way of being? And I thought that was a really interesting question, because it's generally well regarded in the leadership space now that adaptability is a really important asset for leadership, mainly because the world is changing. It's a fast-paced change, AI, technological changes, societal changes as well. So being adaptable to what's going on is obviously a positive quality. But then at the same time, you think, well, if I'm authentic and let's say I'm an introvert, I'm a quieter leader, so should I be trying to speak up more or be louder in certain situations? Or is that just not being true to myself? Is that just not being authentic? And I thought that was a really interesting question. So firstly, let's look at the definition of authentic, which is something being what it is claimed to be. So basically, as a person, if you're being authentic, then you're being true to yourself. You're being what you claim to be. So some people would say that if you're an introvert and you're adapting your style, then maybe that's not authentic. See, I have a different point of view here, because if we assume that our personality is fixed, so basically we just put ourselves in a box and say I'm an introvert or an extrovert, or one of the many personality style assessments that we can do as well. So you're in that box. So let's say we refer to the DISC model, right? Which is, regardless of what you think about that model, it has 4 quadrants in it. And basically the quadrants are the dominant style, the influencing style, the steadiness style, and the conscientious style. And these are behavioral styles. So they represent 4 commonly seen sort of behavioral styles in people. Now, if you just said to yourself, well, I'm the dominant style, right? So that's why I am quite direct with my communication. I tell people what I think of them. I'm not afraid to give people constructive criticism and say what I think. And that would imply that you're putting yourself in a box and you are stuck in that style and you can't get out of that style at all, which obviously you can see that would be quite limiting, right? If you couldn't adapt your style at all, then you'd be in big trouble. So if you're thinking of yourself as fixed in a personality box which can't move, then I would say that this is where it's very limiting, because being authentic would mean you stick in that personality box and say, well, this is just the way I am. People have to take it or leave it. But unfortunately, that doesn't usually work so well, because you will have to adapt your style to suit the situation, which might mean getting the best out of other people or maybe pushing people a bit harder. So for example, in my project management career, I'm an introverted person, quite softly spoken in general, but in certain situations, I did a lot of project management work, and in those sort of situations as a project manager, sometimes you have to be a little bit more directive and a bit more direct with your communication when things aren't happening the way you need them to. And do I feel that that's being inauthentic to adapt to that? No, I don't think so. I think that's still authentic, because I don't see myself as just putting myself in a box where I have no ability to adapt outside of being an introvert, for example. So one of the common models of personality, which has been out for a long time now, is the OCEAN model. And the idea here is the OCEAN is an acronym, And basically, you measure the characteristics of someone's personality through these 5 aspects. And sometimes people use this sort of stuff in hiring to see if they can get the best candidate. And the first characteristic is openness to experience. So basically, how open are you to trying new things, doing different approaches? The C is conscientiousness. So how structured are you? Do you have attention to detail? All those sorts of good things. The E is extroversion. Basically, extroverts are more stimulated by high stimulus environments, or more energized, I should say, whereas introverts are more stimulated by low stimulus environments or energized by low stimulus environments. Then you've got A, which is agreeableness. So generally, are you agreeable to new approaches or different ideas, or are you quite adversarial, which would be pushing back on stuff all the time? You've met disagreeable people, right? So that would be low on the agreeable spectrum. And the last one is N for neuroticism. And this is the degree to which you experience, anxiety, worry, and all those sort of negative emotions that can throw you off. Now, all of these characteristics, essentially, the idea was if you score high on all of these things, you are more predicted to be a high performer, except for neuroticism, in which we want low characteristics in that area. So this is one model and the dimensions of personality there. And these dimensions have been shown to be relatively stable, but you can change them. So I want you to think about this a little bit differently though. So when I say adapting your style, what I'm really talking about is adapting your behavior, not your personality. So you can be an introvert who runs workshops and delivers training and does public speaking. And that's exactly what I do, but I'm quite an introvert. So I'm adapting to the situation. And when I'm in a networking situation, I can be quite chatty. I can have good conversation and I can seem like I'm a bit extroverted, but actually I'm an introvert. So I'm adapting my behavior. I'm not changing my personality. I'm just adapting my behavior. So that's the difference I see here. Are you adapting your behavior to get the best out of the situation? So I think you definitely can be authentic and adapt your behavior at the same time, because we're not adapting our personality. But there is a distinction here as well. So let's think about something else. I recently did some facilitation training, which is basically running workshops and training sessions. And I went to a training course myself. And it was really interesting because the facilitator, who's really great, by the way, her name is Kerry Price. Look her up on LinkedIn if you are interested in facilitation and improving your facilitation skills. But essentially, her style is super energetic. So she's quite extroverted. She's a ball of energy. She likes the high energy stuff. She'll do little dances, whatever it is, right? So she will be quite energetic in her facilitation. And basically, we were talking about this, and you don't want to facilitate like her if that's not your style. You've got to do it like you. So when I'm running training or workshops, for example, and I do a lot of this now, I am more outgoing. So I do talk more than I usually would, because if you're running training and you don't talk, well, that's going to be quite limiting. So I do talk more than I usually would when I'm training. But what I don't do is change the way I am in terms of my mannerisms. I'm still quite casual, quite calm. I'm you'd probably describe me as lower energy than some more extroverted people. Yet I am adapting my behavior by speaking more and being louder sometimes than I would be, because I need to get people's attention if we're in group activities or something like that. So I'm adapting my behavior, but I'm not adapting my personality. And it's still genuine. My style of facilitation is still genuine to me, because it's a bit more understated than someone who's dancing around and running around the room with high energy. And so you can still be yourself and use your own style without changing your personality completely. So think about it in a meeting, right? If you're in a meeting and you think you should speak up, you can choose to speak up more. It doesn't mean you're shouting or commanding or being directive or taking over the entire meeting, but you might speak up with some of your ideas, and maybe that's in a quieter way. Maybe you even raise your hand to get attention and then speak. So you can adapt your behavior without adapting your personality. It's a necessary thing in leadership, obviously. So you think about the team members in your team. Some of them might be very experienced and very motivated. So what do you do with those people? Well, generally, you give them space, you empower them, and you give them more room to move. You don't need to check in with them as much potentially because you trust them more. So you're a bit more hands off. What about the people who are new to your team? They're not so skilled and maybe they're lacking motivation or they're a bit lacking in confidence. Well, with those people, you might be more directive. So you might give them clearer instructions. You might check in on them more often to make sure they're on the right track. And someone who's inexperienced but very enthusiastic, you might choose to guide them or coach them. So you give them a lot of support. You don't need to motivate them really because they've already got that motivation. But what you're doing is you're sort of guiding them in the right direction because they lack the experience or skills at the moment. So once again, you're adapting your behavior, not necessarily adapting your personality. Now, so what would be some examples of not being genuine? Well, in the example I gave you before about workshop facilitation, it would be me trying to pretend that I'm super energetic and really outgoing. That would come across as inauthentic, and people would probably work out that that's not really your style. Another thing would be if you pretend it as a leader that you've got everything under control all the time. If you're worried about things, you're not telling people about that. You're just pretending you've got the answers and you know what you're doing at all times. That sort of thing is inauthentic in general because often it can be a benefit to actually be vulnerable and let people know, hey, I'm a bit worried about this. What do you think we should do, right? You could ask your team members, what do you reckon we should do in this situation? And that's quite authentic because you're acknowledging that maybe I don't have all the answers here and you're getting someone else's opinion. And sometimes this can build a lot of credibility because people believe that you're a bit more real if you're actually admitting that, wow, you don't have all the answers and maybe you're a little bit worried about what might happen here. So that would be an example of, when you're pretending. So not being authentic would be pretending to be someone else, a different type of leader. So to be more authentic, you've really got to understand yourself really well. Like, are you an introvert or an extrovert, or are you somewhere in the middle? Are you more softly spoken? Are you louder? Do you have a good attention to detail? Are you a bit more of a big picture thinker? All these things are aspects of your personality that you want to lean into. But don't forget that you can always change your behavior depending on the situation. So even if you're a big picture thinker and you don't usually have attention to detail, you might choose to focus really heavily on the detail for a short period if you've got something really important that needs to be done. And so these are the sort of choices you're going to have to make along the way. And so there's a difference between pretending and just adapting your behavior. And hopefully I've clarified that for you at the moment because it's really important to adapt. And I don't want you to think that when you're adapting your behavior, you're actually being inauthentic, because I don't believe that's true. I think we all have to be adaptable because otherwise we put ourselves in a personality box and we can't break out of that box. And that's not helpful because you'll be limited by the aspects of your personality that you have. So for example, if you're a quieter person and you say, well, I can't do that thing because I'm not loud enough, you can be louder. You're just adapting your behavior. You're not adapting your personality. And obviously, you've got to be careful because the more you change your style, the more fatiguing it's likely to be. And I've talked about this before. So making sure that you stay true to your own sort of style and behaviors, your natural behaviors as often as you can, but then choosing to adapt when you need to. So I just thought I'd throw this topic in because I think it's an interesting question. Is it authentic to adapt your personality? And I would say, well, you're not really adapting your personality, you're adapting your behavior, and you're doing it in a way that's genuine to you. So I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. Leave me a comment on the show notes page, or you can whack one in Spotify as well if you use that app. I'd love to read them and respond to them when I can as well. And if you're interested in doing any coaching yourself with me, then please get in touch. You can do that through my leadership coaching page as well. And I work with leaders all the time on this sort of stuff, right? Adapting their approach and adapting their style. So that might be helpful for you too. So check that out on the show notes page. For this episode is thoughtfulleader.com/podcast/305. And if you like this episode or the podcast in general, I would love it if you could give me a 5-star rating on whatever your app of choice is. It just helps me get the word out about the podcast. I appreciate you doing that in advance. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back next week.